Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining this talk. I have been doing this work for 20 years, and as Anne mentioned before, I used to be a scientist, and so I was very much involved in the world of logic, reason, chemistry, physics, mathematics. For me, they explained the whole world. Everything I needed to know was contained in the laws of physics and chemistry and mathematics. And that was very well for a while until I got very sick. In fact, I got sick as a result of my work. I used to work with, in research and development, and I used to work with very toxic chemicals. Some chemicals were actually carcinogenic. And so my health broke down quite seriously, and after that, as many of you probably have experienced, you go through a very long journey of recovery, starting off with the medical treatments, and then moving on further and further and further to the left, until I moved as further to the left as could go, which is this. The whole concept of energy, and Qi energy particularly, it always interested me because I was always interested in Eastern philosophy, particularly Taoism. And the roots of this method goes back many thousands of years to Taoism. And particularly the concept of Qi, which for us, for Western people, is a very unusual concept. What is Qi? Qi has been described as the life force that runs through the body. It's like the body's battery. It's what makes the heart beat. It's what makes the lungs breathe in and out. It's what produces all the hormones and all the chemicals we need in the body. The whole biochemical processes, physical and biochemical processes, essentially go back to this most fundamental concept. But as I said, for Western people, this is just so unusual. We are really not used to that. But you see, science is catching up with this. It's so interesting. I'm not going to be talking a lot about science here because it's not the point of this talk, but I have to introduce some very basic concepts before I can move on into the major topic of today, which is family healing. And until we understand really the material world, until we understand what this world is made of, it's very difficult to understand what comes after this whole material world. Like, we can talk about atoms, and science is very good at explaining the physical material world. But when it comes to how does that help me? Like when I was very, very sick, and I was sick for about 10 years, all the laws of chemistry and physics and mathematics and biology didn't help me. And so understanding what the world is made of, which is what science is about, does not help you to understand what it's made for and why. In other words, it gives you the explanations. It gives you can understand what this thing is, but it's got a purpose and it's got a meaning. And until we grasp the meaning of life, to know what it's made of, I don't think helps us a great deal. There was a great philosopher, Ludwig Wittgenstein. He said something along the lines, even after all the scientific questions have been answered, the problems of life will remain untouched. The problems of life is, I got somebody in my family who is very sick, or I've lost my job, or somebody I love very much has passed away. So the stuff that we have to really deal with in our everyday lives, no matter how much you understand what atoms are, no matter how much you understand what this material world is made of, is not really going to help us solve these problems. So essentially, it doesn't matter whether we are living in the 21st century or in the 1st century. I think we're still pretty much dealing with the same issues, the same emotional issues, the same mental issues. We want to have a good life. We want to have a fulfilling life. We want to be able to live in the world in harmony with everyone. So these are actually spiritual concepts. So even though I'm going to be talking a little bit about the physics of the human body, but understand that the bulk of this talk is a lot more spiritual. But we start off with this, because we need to understand what this is. And once you understand what that is, then I think everything will flow on from that. Qi is actually defined as the union of two energies. What we call the yin and yang energies. Again, no translation to the English language. There's 3 words here on the board that have no translation to the English language or any other language for that matter. But incidentally, this goes back even longer than what the Chinese and the Koreans figured out. This is the word Fi. This comes from the Egyptians. It goes back to Egyptian time, really, really, really ancient. They found this is the primal life force. This is the primal energy which creates everything, absolutely everything. And then from that, of course, we have the word Qi and Qi. Now, it's very important to understand those two. This is a negative polarity. This is a positive polarity. Now, that is the crucial point to how life is created. Life is created through the union of these two polarities. Once nothing can be created without the union of two opposite polarities. So even when you're talking about electricity, how do you get this electrical light? You have that through the union of these two opposites. But you know who these are? This is essentially his mother, and this is father. So do you know when we get Qi? Qi happens at conception, when father and mother come together, when those two energies come together. At conception, at that time, we are just energy. Just energy. It's like a spark. This actually creates a spark. And you know how you know that? Even with IVF, when you do IVF, basically what they do is they start the fertilization in a petri dish outside. So they got the sperm, they got the egg, they inject the sperm into the egg, and then what? They zap it with electricity. You cannot start life without energy, without electricity. They actually zap it with an electric current to start the whole fertilization process, so the sperm can fertilize the egg. So, and we know that without those two polarities, and what is that zapping? What that's the electricity? Electricity is the two polarities, the two negative, positive polarity. So we know that without these two polarities, we cannot create life. But mother and father, in turn, were made by their parents, and their parents, and their parents, and their parents. So essentially, what we're inheriting here is not just energy. You need to start thinking this in terms of information. Now, this has become the hottest topic in science. Scientists these days, they are not even talking about atoms, molecules, even subatomic particles. This is 18th century science. You know what everybody's talking about these days? Information. And you know what information is? Information is a quantum state. Sorry, I'm not going to take you there. That's too complicated. I'm not going to go there because I don't really know a lot about it anyway. But what I'm trying to say is this. The quantum state holds all the information. When you talk about information, it's not the stuff we read on the internet, no. You need to understand that information is the very code of life, the instructions the instructions how to make a human being, the instructions how to make that plant, the instructions how to make these flowers, the instructions how to make a fish, a bird. Everything in the world, in life, contains the information of how to create life. The information to make a human being is a very particular information. It's not the same information that makes a fish. Now, what they are finding, what is more interesting, is that this information is so beyond the atomic world that they cannot describe what it is. That's why they talk about it exists in a quantum reality. Quantum essentially is the essence, is the primal, is the beginning of everything. If you think of the universe, before there were stars and planets and so on, there was a quantum reality there, which is the potential for something to become. Now, the reason this is so interesting is that here, for many years, I've been talking about we hold the information of our ancestors in us. We hold the information. Now, what is so good about it is that science, as I said, is catching up with this. This is a very interesting time to be alive, because it's when science is coming full circle back to some very ancient concepts that we need to bring back into our reality. Now, the interesting is that from this also comes the science of epigenetics, which I'm going to be talking a little bit about more later. This is, for me, one of the greatest, if anybody asking me what was the greatest discovery of the 20th century, it's been around for a few years, I would say epigenetics. Epigenetics is confirming in a very scientific way everything that people thousands of years ago knew. And what epigenetics is saying is that, okay, let's retrace a bit. Classical genetics essentially said that we are born with all the genes we're going to have for the rest of our lives, and these genes are locked inside the cells and they never change for as long as you live. Now, epigenetics has totally turned that on its head. That is not the case at all, and it's been shown again and again and again. What they are saying is that everything we are exposed to in our environment, and physically, mentally, emotionally, is changing our genes. And this change is being passed on to the next generations. So they found that, for instance, and there's thorough studies done in Sweden, and they kept meticulous records of, there was a very, very terrible famine late 19th century, early 20th century in Sweden. And people were exposed to really, really serious famine. And they found that 2 or 3 generations later, the great-grandchildren all had diabetes. And they found the markers, the genetic markers that kind of said that those kids had been exposed to famine. Well, they were not, but their great-grandparents were. And they found that that information is carried across the generations. Sometimes it may skip 1 or 2 generations, but eventually manifests later on. And they found any environment. Another interesting, incredible studies that they did was during 9/11. The mothers who were pregnant in New York at that time of 9/11, who were right there when the whole thing happened, pretty much near ground zero. They were exposed to such stress, and they were pregnant. And they found that all these children now already 11, 12, 13 years old, all these children now, the whole cortisol system, which is responsible for the response to stress, is being totally damaged. And these children are responding to stress in such a extreme way, like something happens and bang, their bodies are all producing stress hormones at the smallest thing, so on. They found the whole cortisol system in those children have been so totally changed. Now, But a more interesting thing is, which we're going to give you a copy later on, which gets even better. And this is very recent. These studies were done only a few months ago at a few universities in America and other places. Now they found, again, through epigenetics, that memories are passed down through the generations. Before, they only found an environmental effect, a very stressful effect that people are subjected to. Now they're finding that something as intangible as memories are being passed down through the generations. Now, how relevant is all of this for us? One, if you see yourself as information, don't see yourself just as bodies, this just physical matter. But remember, this physical matter is made of atoms. This body is made of atoms. Atoms are made of particles. You keep going down, subatomic atoms and particles and so on. And you know what you get right at the bottom of it? You get quantum. You get that quantum reality that they're all talking about now. And in this quantum reality, all the information is being held. So when people have inherited a particular gene for a particular illness, it's not the gene that's causing the illness, it's the information. Can we change that information? Oh yes, that's why you're here. Because if you couldn't change that information, then there is no point of you being here, and there's no point of me even standing here in front of you. With Qi energy, you can change that information. And I think it's going to take another 200, 300 years, hopefully less, for science to catch up with that. We can change that information with the original stuff that creates life. So it's not genes, it's not the biochemical processes in your body that is controlling your body, it's the information. But this information, you know where this information comes from? Your parents, your grandparents, your great-grandparents, everything they were exposed to, and I mean everything they were exposed to physically and mentally, you are carrying in you. If later on this manifests as anxiety or depression or cancer or diabetes, well, that is not the throw of the dice. This is simply that you have inherited that information, and there is a way to change that information. There is a scientist who described disease, and I think that's the best description I have ever come across of disease. He described disease as scrambled information. Scrambled information. All the information got messed up. And then he says, with the right information, we can unscramble it. But do they have the right information? No. He only knows, they only knows with the right information we can unscramble it. But they haven't figured out yet what that information is. Well, thousands of years ago, people knew what that information was. This is why you really need to grasp this concept of Qi before you can make any sense of what's coming after. Now, essentially, you can think of yourself as, you know who you are? As you. You're a combination of environmental factors and ancestral factors. I'm not going to be talking about this because that's not the point of this talk. I'm only going to be talking about this. But understanding the environmental means everything that you and your parents were exposed to and their history, everything that they're holding. So this, at conception, when you are created, you are just particles of light. That spark, there's those two polarities, plus and minus coming together, creates light. And this light is what holds the information. And again, this has been known since Isaac Newton, even well before that, that light, when you talk about that original light of the Big Bang, from that original light, then particles of matter began to form. So they know that light holds all that information. And our bodies are constantly emitting particles of light. And we're also receiving that light. This essentially is what keeps us healthy. But going back to that point that I said before, when the information is scrambled, then your body cannot receive these particles of light that are coming from the universe and the earth, which is supplying all our energy system with the energy that it needs to function properly. Now, if our ancestors were exposed to whatever illnesses that they have, we have the information for that illness. And then depending what happens to us, it's not necessarily, for instance, in my case, okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about my story. I'm carrying a cancer gene, and I was given 85 to 9% chance, just like Angelina Jolie, same gene, the BRCA1, which causes breast and ovarian cancer. So, like her, I was told, I'll never forget when the doctor told me the only option I had was to take my breasts off and the ovaries. In other words, take everything out. With an 85 to 9% chance of getting the illness, that's pretty high. You know why? Because it's coming down from both sides of my family. This cancer gene, what happens is I was born in a very little island, a tiny, tiny little speck in the middle of nowhere. And in such small places like this, there is a lot of intermarriage. So there is a lot of intermarriage in my family. In fact, my father's family, my mother's family were the same family way back there, and not too far back actually. And this cancer gene, so somebody mutated that gene. Well, so this cancer gene is being passed down on both sides of the family. So when you inherit a gene, it's coming down both sides of the family, your chances are pretty grim. 85, 90% of chance. Everybody in my family has died from this gene. I'm the only one who's still alive. Now, at that time, and this is well before I found out about Qi and I found out about family healing, at that time I just thought, okay, it's a wait and see. Let's see what's going to happen. I was still quite young at the time. But they told me by the age of 40, which is when it happened, everybody in my family, most likely I would have the illness by then, 40, 42. Well, I'm 60 now, and as you can see, I'm still here. Now, what happens is this. Even though you have inherited a cancer gene, what I have learned now is that that is not a death sentence, and I wish I could meet Angelina Jolie and tell her before she has the next operation. Once you know, and not only that, what concerns me is when you have people of such high profile spreading that this is the message, that is what people have to do. That's my main concern here. Irrespective of a person's personal decision, that's theirs. They make whatever personal decision they make. But when you're spreading such a large information which is going out like that, the only chance you have, or the only option you have, is to have half of your body taken out, then that concerns me. Because that is not necessary. And I think the science of epigenetics is going to catch up with that eventually. They're going to find out that there is a way to change that information we have inherited. So essentially, I'm still carrying that cancer gene 20 years after I was supposed to have got the illness. But what has happened is through Qi, through this original information, with the original information, you can change the information that has gone wrong. I'm not going to cover that in this talk because this is so deep to explain all the nitty-gritty of how Qi can actually change the information that you're carrying in your body. It's going to take another couple of hours. And this talk is just a very basic introduction, and they've got more important things to talk about. So far, I have covered kind of roughly a little bit of scientific stuff. Well, there's a couple more things that are very important as far as science goes. One, they call it the first law of thermodynamics. What that's saying, which you're all familiar with that, this energy can never be created nor destroyed. This is a very, very important law in science. And you know what this body is made of? This body is made of atoms. You know what atoms are made of? Atoms are made of energy. If energy can never be created nor destroyed, so what happens to me? Do I really die? No. Atoms are eternal. All the atoms that have been created at the Big Bang are the same atoms that are here now. No new atoms have been created since the Big Bang. The same oxygen atoms that I'm breathing at this very moment in time was the oxygen atoms that a Roman soldier was breathing 2,000 years ago. Same atoms. So essentially what happens is this. We go from energy, we start off at conception's energy, we become matter, and then we go back to the state of energy. However, the important thing to understand is this. This original energy that makes this matter is not quite the same energy that goes back to that state of matter. What has changed? This matter here now holds all the information of your life. So when I go back to that state of energy, it is not the same original state. That leaving this world, becoming material, already holds all the information. So this energy, which now is eternal, because energy can never disappear, holds all that information. Then when you're conceived by your parents, at that moment of conception, you get that energy which is holding that information of someone who hopefully didn't die in a very bad state. Because if that person has died in a very bad state, that's the information that you're going to be getting. This is the most important thing to understand here, that once matter goes back to energy, it holds all the information of that matter. Now, the whole point of what we are doing, what we are here today, is to really understand, and that is when the spiritual stuff, now I'm going to leave the, and the other one, it comes from physics, information can never be destroyed, information can never be lost. Very, very important law in physics. Very, very important law. So again, they are saying the reason that happens is like, the only reason I can make a baby just like myself is because I pass that information on. The implication of information being lost, of information being destroyed, was that all life would come to an end. And this goes for everything. Those flowers, see, they're identical. How come? Why are they identical? Because they passed that information on. If they didn't, nothing could continue. No life could continue. Now, as far as science goes, this is the end. Now I'm going to be talking about the more spiritual stuff. The more if you don't grasp the spiritual understanding of ancestral healing, no matter how good the science is, no matter how much stuff I can tell you, it's not going to make any difference. So what I'm trying to do here, first I'm going to try to talk to your head. Talk to your head about the science, which is, to me, is not really that important. Now I'd like to talk to your heart. And you need to really listen to this second part with your heart, not with your head. What that means is, in my family, as I said, everybody died of cancer, except my father, who had a heart attack, stroke, plus hundreds of other things. And I loved my father very deeply, so when he passed away, of course, it took me a long time to recover. But the incredible thing is that because we were so close, and I was living on the other side of the world when he passed away, and yet, whenever I thought about him, I felt such deep pain in my heart. I mean, really, really deep pain. And there was this feeling of, he's still in pain. I don't know how, but he is. And I'm not a religious person. I left that behind a long time ago. But that is not to say that For me, life, everything is both material and spiritual, and we need to have a good understanding of both, without any religious preconceptions. But if people, of course, they have their own religion, that's so very well. We all have our own personal beliefs. But when I talk about the spiritual understanding, is life is eternal. Life does not end with physical death. And many religions, of course, understand that and believe that. But as I said, we live in such a scientific age where this kind of stuff has been left to, left on the side. Now, I think here we are trying to revive that understanding of the eternity of life. But we live in the eternal world with the information of this life. There is a remarkable book which was written by a doctor. You can write this down or you can remember, because it's a very easy name to remember, easy title. It's called Return from Tomorrow. It's a tiny little thing. You can read it in a couple of days, which are usually the best books. He had a near-death experience, and he went into the other world. He was dead for 9 minutes, and he came back to tell the story. And it was a really, really remarkable story. Really remarkable what he experienced in the other world. And this is very useful for you to read, because it gives you a real understanding of what he describes so clearly is that the body goes back to the earth because it's matter, but the mind lives on, or consciousness, which again has become a really hot topic in science. What is consciousness? Well, they don't know, but there's a lot of investigators trying to find out. But with a lot of research that has been done on near-death experiences, they are pretty much sure that consciousness survives the death of the body. But this consciousness does not change after death. This consciousness is very much the mind you had in this life. So if I didn't like potatoes in this life, I'm going to go up to the next, still not liking potatoes. It does not change. And what he found was, especially in cases where people committed suicide, that they were carrying, he saw all the spirits in that world carrying the pain that drove them to take their lives. And his description is quite extraordinary, because he describes the spirit world, which is kind of how we understand it here. For me, it was very nice. I came across that book accidentally, and I'm really glad I did, because it's somebody who's got nothing to do with our organization, with what we do here. And yet, his understanding, his description of this other world is very, very similar to what we understand. So he talks about 5 levels in the spirit world. I'm not sure if he went through all the levels, but he could see quite clearly that there were levels. People go to particular levels depending on the state they are. And this is pretty much from the lowest to the highest. To put it in another way, the darkest to the brightest. So you imagine somebody, I'm going to give you a very extreme example. You imagine somebody like Hitler. When he dies, he doesn't become a saint. He was responsible for killing millions of people. He'll go to this level. If a person does not change, and this is a very important point here to understand, if a person does not change before leaves this life, and the whole point, that's why I think religion is very important when they talk about repentance. This is a very, very important thing, extremely important. We need to go through our lives, hopefully not the last breath, but every single day of our lives we need to be repenting. Every single day. Not just before you take your last breath. And we're going to be looking at the things that we do, everything we need to do to make things better in our lives. And this was the message in his book, I'll write it here, Return from Tomorrow. Dr. George Ritchie. You can get it from Amazon for I bought it for 60p from Amazon. The best books are the cheapest. Dr. George Ritchie. So what he says, his message, his real interesting message at the end of the book was, change now. Whatever you have to do, do now. You can't change it later. That is the most important message that he's given in his book. Now, what he found is that depending on the state a person dies, physically and mentally, you're going to go to these levels. Here, of course, here really are the people who have done the best for humankind. And I'm not just talking about your neighbors, your friends, and your close relatives. I'm talking about people like, you can think whoever you like. Personally, I have my favorites. I think we all do. Gandhi and Martin Luther King, and there's hundreds of people throughout history. That lady from Burma, Aung San Suu Kyi, to me it's just absolutely extraordinary. So there are people who they have left their personal lives behind. They are working for the good of humankind. And of course they go to the highest and the brightest level. But our ancestors, they are somewhere there. We might have some, and these are not kind of strict levels, there's a whole, you understand this, there's a whole. So let's say you got some of your ancestors here, some might be there, hopefully one might even have gone up there, wow, why not, And there's you here. Now you're here, you're alive, you're still alive, they are no longer alive. But essentially, and the whole point of understanding what physics is talking about, they're talking about this whole business of quantum entanglement, which is an extraordinary field of study. But again, I'm not going to go into that. But what they talk about quantum entanglement is the connection between all things, and this connection never, ever, ever disappears. Never, never. And the way they did it is such an extraordinary experiment. They just get a photon of light, a photon, which is a particle of light, going through a screen, which has just got a slit. And as it goes through that slit, it separates. So the photon basically is split in two. One goes that way, one goes that way. And what they found is that everything they did to this one, the other one did exactly at the same time, instantaneously, no matter how far apart they were. And they found that they can send these photons to the end of the universe, past our galaxy, and they know that the moment this one does something, the other one does immediately. So this is a very important concept to understand, because it's really telling us in a very clear, rational way that there is no separation. So if you see yourself as separate from your ancestors, this whole concept of quantum entanglement is already going to tell you, no, that is impossible, that does not happen. All things are connected. What happened to them is happening to you. So imagine that you are connected with this particular one here, which in my case, let's say, the one who is carrying the cancer genes, right? So I'm connected to that one, not to that one, but to that one. So I'm constantly receiving that information going back and forth, constantly receiving that information. Will at some point this gene become active? Yes. That is why they give you an 85 to 9% chance of getting the illness. We are talking about here not the gene, but the information that gene is constantly receiving as a result of being connected to somebody who died of that particular illness. I happen to be connected to that. But let's say my brother, here's my brother here. Unfortunately, he was too, but let's hypothetical example. My brother is not connected with that. My brother is connected with this one. Strong connection there. Then, hey, he's fine. He's getting very different information. They all are ancestors. They all the same family. Understand that. They all the same family. But different people in the family are connected with different ancestors. And it's to do with how we resonate, what our level of frequency. I've got my own mind. I've got my own character. I've got my own personality. And if there is an ancestor back there who's got that same similar character, that same similar personality, well, guess what? It's a nice match. But if unfortunately he or she is carrying that illness, then, well, unfortunately, I'm going to be getting that information as well. Now, what is the ancestral healing is doing? The ancestral healing is doing this. Irrespective of what levels they are at, we are changing that information. And they're going up, and they're going up, and they're going up. This can be a long road, and it is a long road. But from my point of view, it doesn't matter how long it takes. Once you, because essentially what the family healing is doing is this. So there's you here, and you've got your father and mother, and father and mother. I'm just going to go up this way. The family healing goes back 4 generations. For 4 generations, we are very much carrying the information of what happened to them. 4 generations, this energy is being passed down to us. And it includes the brothers and single sisters. Single sisters, because once a woman gets married, she's much, much more connected with the husband's family than her own family. Once a woman has a child with the partner, the whole biological, the way nature has made men and women. Men, they are the yang, what they call the yang or the active energy. Woman is the receptive, yin receptive. That's why the woman receives the man's sperm into her body and she makes a baby in her body. That's why nature has chosen women to be who gestated a new life. So what happens is, once the man's energy, is not just the man's sperm, but once the man's energy comes into the woman's body, it actually starts to make change in the woman's body in preparation for that child. So what happens is, if you happen to be a woman, you are very, very much connected with your husband's family as well. Very, very much so. In fact, after marriage, the influence coming from the husband's family, or after having children anyway, is much, much stronger than her own family. But let's assume at this stage, let's say, so this is for both the single, this is for the married people. So this goes up 4 generations, starting from the first generation has passed on, goes back 4 generations. And then you've got your brothers, your sisters, let's assume you've got children. So everybody, and here of course there's the mother's family. So this is the father's family, this is the mother's family, again going back 4 generations. So essentially what the ancestral healing is doing is, as you change that information, you're actually cutting that connection. What that means is, you cannot pass this information on to your children, who in turn cannot pass it on to their grandchildren. This is the most important concept to understand. Once you change this information at this point in time, it cannot keep being passed on. And somebody asked me some time ago what proof I can give that ancestral healing works, and my answer was my grandchildren. I have seen over 3 generations. You see, if you do the family healing and you're going to be looking 1 month later what's happened, or even a year later what's happened, but over 3 generations, I have seen what has happened. I did ancestral healing 20 years ago. And I saw how it changed my son, and I saw how it changed his children. His children now are the happiest, the healthiest, and the mother, she had chronic fatigue syndrome, very, very sick, very, very ill when she was pregnant. And she also developed diabetes during her pregnancy. She was very, very ill. And yet she gives birth to these extraordinary, healthy, full of energy kids that they're absolutely unbelievable. So essentially what has happened is that I can see that that information is not being passed on to the next generations. One of the important things to understand about living the present, which is really the only thing that exists, is holding past and future together. Future is the potential life. Past is the one that has happened, but we are holding all that information from the past in us. It hasn't gone anywhere. So, and that information then we pass to the future. So once you change that information in the present, you're actually changing past, you're changing future. I'm not going to go into that, but it's a very important concept in physics as well, the concept that time does not exist, and it doesn't. No matter how counterintuitive it is, time does not exist. Everything is actually happening simultaneously in the now. Now, one of the things that I found really extraordinary with cancer, because it's, as I said, it's the thing that's concerned me the most, is the cancer rate, despite all our science, despite all our knowledge, all our technology, keeps going up and up and up. Now, 60, 70 years ago, roughly around the end of the Second World War, and these were people, if you think about 2 world wars, you had the First World War, a few years later you have the Second World War. These were generations that were exposed to tremendous pain and suffering and hardship. Now, at the end of the Second World War, which was not enough time to really change all this epigenetic information, the cancer rate was 1 in 20, approximately 1 in 20. Today, for women, it's 1 in 3. For men, it's 1 in 2. After the age of 60, it's 1 in 2 for everyone. And there is an article that I came across recently. They're calling it, the doctors are calling it a cancer tidal wave. They're expecting by the year 2030, the cancer rate across the whole population is going to be 1 in 2. 50% of people are going to be having cancer, but their concern is it's going to overwhelm the health services. That is what they're concerned about. Now, I've been asking myself this question, what is going on here? With all our science, with all our technology, with all our knowledge, well, I think I'll tell you what I think is going on here. If a person dies, if a person does not heal that illness during his or her life, that information is going to keep passed on, and it's being passed on from generation to generation. The importance of healing this illness during our lives, and I don't mean heal it with chemical means. I'm not talking about chemotherapy or surgery here. I'm talking about healing the energy system that holds that information, which is what is going to live on after the physical body is gone. So please understand that. The energy system is what holds that information. Matter goes back to the earth. Matter is matter. It goes back to the earth. They're atoms. They're just recycled. They go back to the nature. They go back to the earth. They go back to the water. They go everywhere. But the energy system, this is what I said, that law in science, the first law of thermodynamics is very, very important. Energy can never be created nor destroyed. So your energy system that's holding that information, that lives on eternally, is going to pass that information on. Even if I can say, oh, I had my chemotherapy treatment, I don't have the cancer anymore. But your energy system is holding that information. A chemical cure does not cure the energy system. What cures the energy system is this. the original information that we inherit at conception, the original light, that from light, particles of matter begin to form. 9 months later, we come out of this solid physical body. But that is what creates the energy system. That is what holds that information. And with Qi, we can change that information. So, as I said, the way we do it, whoa, that's another topic. If you want to find out more about it, we can have another talk, or you can come on a one-to-one consultation, then we can explain how Qi works. But essentially, if you were, Anne mentioned before, we're going to be giving this 6 weeks course. 6 weeks course is basically you learning how to heal your body with Qi. So if you've got any particular health problem, you have to heal your body before you leave this life. So Qi is healing your body, but that's just your body. And hopefully then you don't pass that information on to the next generation. But then with Qi, we can change all the information of the ancestors going back 4 generations in that family. That information can be changed. So this 6 weeks course is for you to learn how to receive Qi, how to change the Qi in your body. And it's not just body, it's mind as well. Because everything that's happening in the mind is happening in the body. And Qi has got a way to clear a lot of stuff from the mind as well. It starts to unscramble the information, and it starts to unscramble your mind as well. A lot of stress, a lot of negative emotions, a lot of stuff that we're carrying us, this energy actually pushes it out of you. It's an ancient method that goes back many, many thousands of years, goes back to Taoism. The Taoist masters, they learned the method of Qi regeneration, Qi healing, and some of them were known to have become immortals. Have you come across the concept of the Taoist immortals? Anyone? No? Okay. It's not that, well, it's just an extraordinary thing. What that means is like they were able to extend their lives because as they keep receiving this energy, they keep circulating this energy through all the organs, through all the systems, through everything in the body. Guess what? You can extend your life for a very long time. Some of the immortals were known to have lived 250, one was known to have lived 500 years. This is not mythology. This is thoroughly documented. In fact, the last Taoist immortal was born in the 1700s and he died in 1948. So that is Qi, because Qi is eternal. This is what I said, energy does not die. Qi is eternal. But once you know the method of how to receive that Qi and circulate that Qi through your whole body, I mean, I don't expect anybody here to become immortal, but I can tell you, certainly I don't think I will, but I can tell you that that energy can start change your whole energy system. It starts to regenerate your energy system. And that is what we do in the Qi training. But with that same Qi, we change the information that we have inherited from our ancestors. Hey, I've got 5 minutes to spare, but I'm going to finish here.